Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ryan Smith. We're really excited to have you here at our connectivity community event. We're going to give some time to allow folks to come in the chat, but I do want to say happy day and really excited to be here. My name is Ryan Smith. I am one of the IET members, and we'll be starting in 1 second. Welcome. Once again, for those who are joining, welcome to our Committee for Greater Los Angeles, delivering broadband as a civil rights, as a civil right in Los Angeles. My name is Ryan Smith. We're excited. We're going to start in 1 second. Really appreciate you joining us for an amazing event where we talk about the importance of broadband and digital equity across Los Angeles. So give us a minute to let folks in the room and we'll begin. Thank you. All right, well, I believe we have a good crowd. So excited, delighted, and honored to have you this morning. I want to say on behalf of our Internet Action Team members who've been working very diligently to bring together this blueprint, we're really excited to host this webinar today. My name is Ryan Smith, and I've had the pleasure of serving on the Internet Action Team over these couple of months and working with a dynamic group of Los Angeles leaders to really talk about the equity imperative around the digital divide and how we address that and how we ensure that we are delivering broadband to all Los Angelenos. I also serve as the Chief Strategy Officer for Community Coalition, and as we think about the importance of not only closing the digital divide, but making sure communities like South Los Angeles and other historically underserved communities across the county get high quality broadband. It's going to be an exciting opportunity for us to really discuss how to do that and also provide you an opportunity to learn more about what is actually in our report. So excited to do that today. Excited that you're going to hear from a host of amazing speakers and leaders across Los Angeles as well. So a couple things that I think are going to be really important. One, we will be taking questions throughout the day. So you will be able to actually put in your questions. We'll be collecting those. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A. But before we do that, you're going to hear from leaders across the city as they discuss this issue. So excited about today, really delighted to MC today from the headquarters of Community Coalition. And I'd like to hand it off to our very own chair, Miguel Santana, who will talk a little bit more about the work that we've been doing. As you know, Miguel Santana is the CEO of the Weingart Foundation and has done amazing work, particularly around this issue, but particularly issues about closing equity divides. So with that, I hand it to someone I admire and respect, Miguel Santana.
Thank you, Ryan, so much for that introduction and for facilitating this important conversation. And thank you all for listening in. The Committee for Greater LA, for those of you who maybe haven't been part of our work, is a group of civic leaders working to advance system change throughout Southern California and dismantle institutional racism here in LA. We're committed to advancing equity across a wide range of issues. It's hard to believe since the spring of 2020, inspired by the racial injustice that was exposed by the pandemic, the committee has engaged civic and community leaders in real conversations about solutions to systemic challenges by forming action teams to tackle priorities identified in our first landmark report, No Going Back, Together for an Equitable and Inclusive Los Angeles. You're welcome to look at our website if you haven't read that report. Working with top research institutions here in Southern California, subject matter experts, community partners, and people with lived experience, the committee has released reports on a full range of issues, including homelessness, anti-Black racism, nonprofit capacity building, and elevating those issues and solutions to the broader community through media, as well as to decision makers. Aligned with our commitment to equity, the Committee for Greater LA formed the Internet Action Team, also known as the IAT, comprised of leaders from government, civic, philanthropic, tech, economic development, education, and healthcare sectors, including academics, practitioners, and business and community leaders to explore solutions to advancing this digital equity. There was no better illustration of what an important issue this is than how our young people suffered without connectivity as they try to continue their education. We see increasing access to fast, reliable, and affordable internet to all Angelenos as a key component to achieving our mission. We believe universal access to fast, reliable, and affordable internet is a threshold issue for equitable health, economic, and social outcomes. While there are many initiatives that address this digital divide, this is the first policy blueprint that provides a roadmap to harness and coordinate all the efforts for both systemic and progressive action to last, not just for the moment, but forever. Today's report builds on the committee's track record of bringing people together to advance system change, and we look forward to sharing the policy blueprint with each of you. I want to thank the co-chairs of this committee, Evan Spiegel and Jerry Barrios, who were so careful and thoughtful and inclusive in developing this work. Back to you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Miguel, for your remarks, and appreciate all of your leadership on the committee. Speaking of leadership, I'm always excited by those who are committed to our region and have really championed issues of equity. And our next speaker has decades of experience, not only as a legislator, not only as a champion for making and ensuring that our communities are safe, but also as a philanthropic leader here in Los Angeles. And I'm honored for his work and the way that he has led the Internet Action Committee. He's also the Senior Vice President of the California Community Foundation. Please welcome Jared Barrios. Jared.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. And thank you, Miguel, for introducing the Committee for Greater LA. I have the pleasure of co-chairing with my friend Evan Spiegel, the committee's IAT, the Internet Action Team. If there was a single moment during COVID that maybe crystallized why we all stood up on this issue, it was that photo that went viral of the two girls outside the Taco Bell sitting outside because they didn't have broadband at home and they needed to get their schoolwork done. There were probably a dozen other images like that in the housing, health, education settings that made a lot of us angry that in 2021, then, now 2022, that there were still so many that couldn't take for granted their ability to participate in our economy, to take advantage of the promises of what it means to be an Angeleno and an American fully because we didn't have regular access to broadband. Hundreds of thousands of people in Los Angeles County don't have broadband, and we want to remedy that. We believe, as Miguel said, that fast, reliable, and affordable broadband is a right that every Angeleno should deserve. There's also a moment here. There's an opportunity with federal and state dollars coming towards us where we can actually do something to create the infrastructure, to address the infrastructure gaps that have previously existed. We can fix it, as Miguel said, forever. We can build an infrastructure. We can future-proof our system here in LA so that young people in a generation will also have fast, reliable, and affordable broadband. This is what we wrestled with in this report, and I'm really excited that my colleagues on the Internet Action Team joined me, and you're going to hear a little bit about both the challenge and about what we are suggesting are the opportunities for Los Angeles to remedy the digital equity divide here in Los Angeles. Thank you for joining today. Back to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Jared. Excited to continue the conversation with our next speaker, who has really helped us understand, crystallize, and bring data together. So I'd like to introduce Danny Fuchs, who is the partner of HRNA. Danny.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I really appreciate it, Jared. It's been a pleasure to work with the Internet Action Team throughout the last year in developing this policy blueprint. I'm happy to speak to the slides here. I lead the broadband and digital equity practice at a company called HRNA Advisors, based in Los Angeles and with offices across the country. We served as research partners to the Internet Action Team over the last year in developing this policy blueprint. So I'll take the slides, please. So this is our team. We first looked at the two maps. One is showing that 20% of Los Angeles County households do not subscribe to broadband in their home. And that 20% is a county-wide number. And you can see in the map, the areas in red have significantly higher than 20% that do not subscribe to broadband in their home. Cost is the greatest barrier to access, with the lowest quintile of families having only 50% that subscribe to broadband at home, otherwise only using a mobile phone for their access, which limits the opportunity that the internet provides on computers to do things like applying for jobs, video conferencing, telehealth, and more. Next slide. That is the moment, that is the challenge of the moment. The challenge over the next generation is a question of infrastructure too, in which we find that 72% of the census blocks in the county do not have fiber to the home broadband. Fiber to the home is a technology that is currently the priority policy of the federal government in its funding to deliver more fiber-based internet, which is essentially considered a future-proof or future resilient technology to deliver the highest speeds nearly infinitely scalable to any home. Only 1 in 4 blocks in the county has access to fiber, and fiber is essential for all types of broadband delivery media, whether that's fiber as the backbone for cable networks, fiber as the backbone for fixed wireless networks. But the expansion of fiber became a generational systemic change, necessity that the Internet Action Team lifted up. And so, informed by those two maps and a series of other conversations and other analyses, the next slide shows the 3 objectives that the Internet Action Team developed. The first was universal adoption, to ensure that all residents in the county are connected to broadband service of speeds of at least 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload for no more than $30 per month by 2027. that those speed thresholds and price points are developed because they're based on the ability to achieve that goal within the next few years, based on an affordable connectivity program from the federal government that would give $30 per month subsidies to make that level of service free to any households that are eligible for those subsidies. The second priority is that fiber future, to eliminate disparities in broadband accessibility, ensuring that every resident has the means to access, afford, and adopt fiber-based broadband service with at least gigabit symmetrical speeds, or 1,000 megabits per second over 1,000 megabits per second by 2040. And the third was to recognize that there needs to be sustained advocacy around this issue, to elevate and grow a vibrant ecosystem of community advocates from across the county to focus on aligned, active, and sustainable broadband equity advocacy. The next slide talks about how we achieve that fiber future and the need to organize government. Government must, the IAT believes that the government must accept responsibility for closing the digital divide. This is not a historic responsibility of government, but LA County and all of its municipalities must recognize broadband as a public good and a civil right, identify the priority service areas, improve their existing systems to support new broadband deployments, and build new capacity in government so that they can accept responsibility for this critical issue. The next slide shows that, or highlights the fact that the IAT believes that government cannot do it alone. Community voices must be elevated, must be partners to that effort to deliver that fiber future. To build a backbone advocacy organization, to continue to elevate this issue, to engage grass top leaders, to continue to convene the digital equity ecosystem across the county, as well as to develop a consistent and compelling media narrative as that shapes so much of policy as well. The next slide talks about what's next here. For the IAT. On universal adoption, the county and its municipalities and partners are doing a number of wonderful things around supporting adoption programs, including deploying community broadband networks and advertising ACP to promote signups for that, the Affordable Connectivity Program. Number two is going to be a priority focus of the Internet Action Team, which is to shape that fiber future by helping to shape an intergovernmental broadband coordinating committee, which was just announced by for creation by the LA County Board of Supervisors, and to go further than that, to launch a countywide internet infrastructure agency that would be responsible for stewarding new publicly funded infrastructure initiatives and meeting the needs of municipalities throughout the county when it comes to closing the digital divide. The third component is on the sustained advocacy. The IAT is committed to expanding funding for the Digital Equity Initiative at the California Community Foundation to build that digital equity ecosystem across the county and to hold government accountable. Next up, back to Jared, I believe.
Thank you, Danny. I'm going to go back to Ryan. I know we have a couple of great speakers who are going to tell us a little bit about why this issue, what it looks like on the ground in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Jared. So just really quickly, and I think this is important, we want to make sure that we understand the lived experiences of how this actually impacts everyday people. And I had the chance of meeting a student in my work in education who spoke really bravely to the challenges of this issue in a way that really struck me. So I'm excited. He just started at USC. I met him as a high school student. Congratulations, Jan, and I would love for you to share your story. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jan Arroyo. I'm currently a first-year student at USC from South Central Los Angeles. In the past school years, I realized how internet has gone from being a privilege to have to now being a necessity. I could even be argued as a basic human right. The internet now controls not only people's social life, but the way the majority of students get their education through. No internet nowadays makes it impossible for any student, whether it be an elementary student or a student currently attending a four-year university, they cannot receive an education without the internet. The internet has allowed everyone to connect to the remote classes via Zoom throughout the pandemic, but it's also the reason so many people have not been able to receive an education. Personally, the internet completely controls my whole life. Without it, I wouldn't be able to currently attend school and succeed, get the extra help from teachers I need, apply to scholarships so I could afford college. My life would be 10 times harder if I did not have access to the internet. Yet throughout these past years, being able to have and afford internet has been challenging. Because of the COVID pandemic, at one point in high school, both of my parents were unemployed, and to add on to it, 3 of my family members, including my parents, tested positive for COVID. My mother in particular was in critical condition. That, to be honest, we weren't sure if she was going to make it. In a flash, my family's life flipped upside down. My sister and I were now caring for both of my parents and my brother with no income at all. We had no idea where we would get money to pay our rent or even to buy food. Yet, what hurt us the most economically, and one of the things we needed the most, was the internet. That $80 bill showed up at our home. What I needed to go to school, we could not afford. Not having internet for some days made it impossible for me to submit my assignments to my teachers and to attend and keep up with my classes. I even attended the University of Arizona last school year, and there, if I didn't submit my assignments by the deadline, I couldn't do anything about it. I automatically got the fail. And that was the case when I didn't have access to the internet. I couldn't submit my assignments, causing me to get failed on multiple assignments. They did not care what was going on. The deadline was the deadline. And because of how expensive the internet is, I couldn't meet that deadline. Not only is it so expensive, but the best internet service providers offer in my community aren't good enough. My family of only 3 students could not be in class at the same time because it lagged so much that we could not understand what our teachers were saying. And believe it or not, we had it good, apparently, because so many other families were going through worse situations with their internet. My aunt and uncle's family, who were our neighbors at the time, had 6 children, 4 of which were attending school via Zoom. Yet, only 1 of their kids could be in class at the same time with the internet without it lagging. It was so bad that one of their children, my 5-year-old cousin, cried to his mom because he couldn't talk to his teacher and friend. My aunt was paying $80 for his internet, and her kids could not attend school. So what she did was she took help and got some hotspots from the school her kids were attending. But when those schools took away those hotspots and her kids were left with nothing again, back to the lag and not being able to keep up with classes, causing one of her kids to fail multiple classes. This is just one of the situations multiple families are currently facing. And although the majority of schools are now in person, the majority of teachers and professors still are teaching a curriculum that revolves around having access to the internet at home, which is why it's urgent to address affordability, quality, and accessibility of home internet for everyone. Thank you for your time. Back to you, Ryan.
Jan, thank you so much for sharing your story, and congratulations on your freshman year at USC. For the folks who are watching, we're actually in our digital room here in Community Coalition that students like Jan from South Central come to every day because they actually can't get access to broadband. So that this tells you that this is a real imperative in our community. And I'm excited that we have folks like Jan who are championing this policy blueprint. So thank you, Jan. Speaking of that, every Wednesday we have a wellness hub where we're giving vaccinations outside. And we learned firsthand how challenging not having access to high quality broadband here in South Los Angeles was in order for people to actually get access to high quality healthcare. And with that, I'm going to introduce someone who I've come to really respect and admire for the wonderful work that she does in communities and making connections across sectors. So everyone give a round of applause at home for Dr. Fomanine, who does amazing work and can make these connections for us. Doctor.
Hi, thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you so much, Jan, for the very heartfelt story about what your family was going through. I'm a Dr. Fomanin, and I am the Chief Medical and Innovation Officer at Shared Harvest and the My COVID-MD initiative, as well as Project Recess. In 2018, we were founded to strengthen the medical pipeline, and specifically providers of color, so that we can further strengthen our relationships with our patients and advocacy work that we're doing in the community. In 2020, what we saw as an emergency physician, which also I carry that hat of, was that those living in vulnerable communities didn't have access to their primary doctors. And if you didn't have access to your primary doctor, you just didn't have access to healthcare in general, as emergency departments were always the first line providers. And so we set out to create these community-based telehealth clinics and hubs all throughout South LA and some even in Northern California. And the intent was that we were hearing that families like Jan's didn't have access to internet and good, reliable internet to be able to connect with providers and get the help and services they need. And so we thought naively that if we can build these spaces in community hubs in partnership with community-based organizations in the nonprofit space, in the healthcare space, as well as the local churches, we could bring the internet to them and also healthcare to them. And that was not always the case. It was not the solution of just getting hotspots and tablets. What we found really obvious was that there was a greater problem of a digital equity divide, and specifically infrastructure that was lacking in these communities. Specifically, I'll give you an example. One of our greatest partners was Southside Community Church, Southside Church of Christ. And we had over 300 individuals there looking for health services at one time. And our wait times, because of the various internet problems that we had, extended well over 2 hours, but people still needed the help and services. And that was a real eye opener for Shared Harvest, in that we realized that healthcare and the future of health is digital health. And it will leave behind families who don't have access. Just as Jan said, it leaves behind families for education if they don't have access. And so our voice as providers of color who are very cognizant of the challenges already in terms of health inequities needed to be at the table here to speak on the inequities related to internet access and getting specifically reliable, accessible, and affordable broadband services, so that individuals can be a participant of this new era of healthcare. So I've been excited and really proud of what IAT and the action team has put together in this policy blueprint. And it's just the beginning, because we understand that the future of health as a human right equals a future of digital access as a right as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fomanin. We've heard the challenge. We've heard that there are hundreds of thousands of people without internet to take advantage, to be able to use broadband for basic services they need as residents of Los Angeles. There's also opportunities here that we should focus on. And those opportunities include billions of dollars coming from the state and the federal government to build a publicly owned infrastructure upon which we can create affordable broadband opportunities for the residents of LA. But that doesn't just happen, which is one of the reasons we're so thrilled that our visionary board of supervisors just last week created an intergovernmental broadband coordinating committee. The first step, we hope, in creating what Danny Fuchs outlined as an internet infrastructure agency, an entity that can bring together all of these dollars that are coming to the 88 cities in Los Angeles County, to the county itself, to bring them together, to coordinate them so that we can create a network that frankly allows every community in Los Angeles to get the investments in broadband they deserve, so that wherever you live, whatever your zip code, you can have access to fast broadband. That doesn't happen right now. We also know that with competition on a publicly owned network, we will have true affordability. What Jan suffered, what his family suffered with receiving hotspots, those hotspots are great until they hit up against their limits, and then they go dead. Or the subsidy goes away, and then you have an unaffordable hotspot. Those aren't long-term solutions. What we are working for on the Internet Action Team at the Committee for Greater LA are solutions not just for today, although those subsidies are important for today, but for a generation from now. True progressive reform that will solve the challenge of the digital divide. We encourage you to download the report. Please go to nogoingback.la. Download the broadband report, follow us on social, and when the board and when your city examines this possibility of joining together with the other cities in Los Angeles County, speak up for coordinated and effective leadership. We need to have an internet infrastructure agency to make sure that every corner of our county get the investment it needs, and then the speed and reliability and affordability we all deserve. It's not something we can take for granted. This agency, this effort will be what we need to get there. I think, Ryan, I can turn it back to you and we're able to take questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jared, for the compelling call to action. And I will remind the audience, please download the report at nogoingback.la. Please follow us on social media. This is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it. And appreciate the County Board of Supervisors for their leadership. Well, speaking of conversations, we're going to open it up for questions. We are still taking questions. So if you have some thoughts, given what you've heard Jarrett and Dr. Fomanine and Jan and Danny and others say, please submit those now. But I'm going to throw the first question to Jarrett. So, you know, we've heard around the healthcare imperative, we've heard a compelling student talk about this work, but we also know that this impacts small businesses as well. So one of our audience members asked, well, how will small businesses, mom and pop shops, be included in these efforts to close the digital divide? Their businesses are important to the economy, as we know, and we know that our employees need access to the internet in order to do their jobs. So to you, Jared, what do you think about how we include small business in this plan?
That's such a great question. And I'm seeing it here in the chat that from Emma. Emma, thank you for that question. It is important to understand really the reason we are focused on infrastructure investment. So much of the activity right now, when you talk about subsidies, these are subsidies for residences, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the underlying service, or for example, a hotspot, that doesn't change the underlying infrastructure that allows you to get the speed and the reliability and the affordability you need. The reason we are focused on the underlying infrastructure is so that regions of our county that have not had the infrastructure investment, for whatever reason, and I will share with you, South LA and Southeast LA are two of the regions that are most pronounced, the least wired. They have the least amount of fiber in the ground with the slowest speeds. Interestingly, they have some of the highest prices for internet, even though they're the slowest. The reason we want to see infrastructure investments is that it's as if, I think our starting principle, Emma, is that wherever you live in the county, you should have the same access to speed and affordability. But we can't guarantee that unless we know that the billions of dollars that are being now made available for infrastructure investment, that they're being done in a way that's coordinated and ensure that every corner of the county gets that. With broadband, with fiber to the home and to the business, you will have speeds in Watts, you will have speeds in Huntington Park, you will have speeds in Pico Union and South LA that are equivalent to Beverly Hills, that are equivalent to Santa Monica. And we believe that with that, we will ultimately be able to say whether you're a business or a home, you can count on the speeds that you will need in 2022, in 2030, in 2040, and in 2050. You will also have stuff that's affordable because with competition, right, with publicly owned fiber, you can have startups. You might have many communities like they are doing currently in the Antelope Valley who want to create a cooperative to have their own broadband, right? Have a publicly offered broadband service. We're supportive of that. We're supportive of anything which brings more affordability to residents.
Thank you, Jared. Really appreciate that. And thank you for uplifting the data that in the South and Southeast, We have some of the most challenging infrastructure issues, and yet the highest prices when it comes to getting access to broadband. I think that's important to note. And speaking of this, I think this moves us to thinking about action steps. Miguel, I'm going to send this to you. What's the best way to elevate the work of the policy blueprint across Los Angeles and California, given your leadership in the region?
Thank you. Well, it starts really by being honest and not holding back and really identifying the real systemic challenge that exists and calling it what it is. I mean, in many ways, this is a form of digital redlining that has that results in your zip code determining not only your access, but what you pay for it. And you have wealthier communities actually being charged less than less affluent communities for the same exact service. And second, it is about establishing solutions that are driven by the outcome. And so our blueprint offers a number of different strategies to combat this issue. But at the end of the day, it's really about being focused on that universal access. And sometimes it's not just about establishing the infrastructure, as Jared's talked about, but ensuring that communities know how to access it, how to troubleshoot, that they understand the resources that exist for them within their own neighborhoods. And then the last thing is really about focusing on accountability. And I think this is what this blueprint does. It lays out an answer to the question, who ultimately should be accountable for ensuring universal access? And like many of the issues that the committee has combated, from homelessness to the Black experience in Los Angeles, to the challenges the nonprofit sector is facing. If we're not clear about who is it that we need to do what and establish a structure around that, often it's a governance structure, a community structure, then these issues are just laid out and presented to the broader community without folks being clear as to what their role is. And so being honest about the real challenges and the history behind that, ultimately being clear about what is the outcome, and as our report states, not giving up until we actually get to that outcome. And lastly, being clear as to which entity is responsible for ensuring that access. And as a broader community, everyone should care. And obviously everyone listening in has access, and those of us participating have access. But if we are in fact going to be a community that's thriving, that has economic expansion, that is healthy, that has the workforce for tomorrow, this is an issue that everyone should care about, and to ensure that we continue forward until every child, every senior, every person who has been historically marginalized has access to something that is essential to be full participants in the economy of today and tomorrow.
Thank you.
Ryan, could I
Yeah,
add,
please.
I want to add one quick thing to what Miguel said, particularly as I look at a couple of the questions that we've got. I think it's really important when Miguel talks about the access that we want to acknowledge that connectivity is not the only issue here. We understand that people need devices, right? And there needs to be investments in digital literacy. People need to be trained, and people need to understand how to use it. These are things which are critical, but they are also things where there are amazing organizations here in LA across the landscape who are already doing those investments. And when we looked as an IET, where was the gap, right? Particularly with this money coming, and that has an expiration date. That we see where the action wasn't, and that needed to happen now, where the opportunity was, in essence, was in the infrastructure investment. So I just, as I look at some of the questions, +1 to digital literacy, right? +1 to devices, we support that. But our work is focused on the infrastructure, because without the infrastructure, right? Publicly invested infrastructure, we will not be able to long-term guarantee speed and affordability and reliability, whereas we think we can if we can get this. So it's like the foundation for a lot of this other work. I just wanted to clarify that one piece. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Jared. And I'll be really candid with the audience. Right before this event, my computer crashed and I could not get on the internet, could not access my camera, and I had to run to our community center in order to do this webinar. And we're in the heart of South Los Angeles. So that kind of tells you that if a place that's been around for 30 years like Community Coalition, this can happen. The infrastructure issue can happen to any resident, any community member. And that's why we're doing the work on the Internet Action Team. And I'm glad you mentioned the infrastructure piece. It's really important and essential. One good question that we got is, what would the fee payment be at LA County, at an LA County agency or a private contractor? What are you thinking about fees? And I'll turn it over to Jared or Danny or anyone who'd like to answer that question.
Danny, why don't you start with that?
I'm happy to jump in on that. That's not what this report talks about is who should be responsible for setting that fee. Who should make the decision and through what process of what is the cost to consumers on this? How does the public sector, how does government, how does the county, how do the 88 municipalities, wind up having a say in how much internet winds up costing for residents and for businesses? And by focusing on, a coordinated county-wide approach to how public funds wind up getting deployed into more fiber infrastructure across the county, that can be an enabling condition for government elected officials to help to shape what those costs are to different families and to different businesses. I think that also relates to another question that we see in the chat about the role of public-private partnerships in this. Yes, there are internet service providers who continue to invest in Los Angeles, often on a community-by-community basis, and it's different in different communities. And I think one of and yet, for those internet service providers that are seeking to expand their footprint in the county, to do so with public-private partnerships, there's almost no one on the other side of the table. There's almost no one for an internet service provider to talk to about a public-private partnership. At best, it is various county agencies, it is the city of Los Angeles, and it is each of the municipalities within the county. And through the creation of an intergovernmental broadband coordinating committee, and then hopefully an internet infrastructure agency, there would be one public sector entity responsible for structuring and managing public-private partnerships throughout the county to ensure that public dollars are leveraged with private dollars as necessary, while ensuring the quality of that service and the affordability of that service for everyone who needs it.
Thank you, Danny. And just want to remind our audience, please download the report, learn more about what Danny just said in nogoingback.la. You will see the importance of what Danny just spoke to. And speaking of importance in this moment, I'm an advocate. I believe that people want to move towards action. So I love this question from one of our audience members. Could you reiterate your next steps specifically? What kinds of supports are you looking for moving forward and from where? It's almost as if I wrote the question myself. So I will give that because I believe we have to remind folks what to do. So please, Jared and others on the committee, if you can respond to that question.
Well, I suspect some of the other members on the committee have some thoughts, but I'll share two quick ways of answering that question. When we began drafting this report, and we've been meeting now for over a year and a half, we thought we were going to be bringing the idea to the Board of Supervisors upon the release of this report, but we've been so encouraged to see the board taking its own leadership, and they've already taken the first step, which is to create an intergovernmental coordinating committee and to create, for the first time ever at the county level, a director of digital equity, somebody to sort of hopefully quarterback the establishment of this committee. It is our hope, and where the next step is, right? So to this question, that needs to lead ultimately that committee to survey all the different cities, engage so that smaller cities understand what's in it for them and why it's important to be working. That this isn't about the city of LA only, right? This is all cities in the county. That we need to build constituency support across the county for this idea of an intergovernmental, or of an agency, an infrastructure agency that is intergovernmental, in that it engages the cities, the county, metro, all the entities that own and work with fiber. And they all have skin in the game. They're going to make money on this by leasing out their own fiber, and their residents will benefit from it in the form of fast and reliable and more affordable broadband. We think it's important, but that education is still before us. And so what we need, our next steps are going to be to build consensus around that. We believe that residents will want to support this, as it's in everybody's interest to have broadband equally distributed, invested in across the county. We also believe that businesses will support this. To Emma's earlier question, every business, just like every resident, will benefit from more reliable internet. So you don't have what just happened to Ryan with their stuff crashing, right? We even believe ISPs will support this, as you heard from Danny, because they will benefit from having a single entity to go with and work to do their work with their customers. We think this is a win-win-win, but we need to get it created. But that begins with education and engagement of all partners, civic leaders, municipal leaders, county leaders, and obviously private citizens.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate that. And
Dr. had something she wanted to add.
Sure.
Yes, definitely to add to what Jared's saying is that the engagement piece is so critical right now. I think step one is identifying what constituency you represent. Are you in healthcare? Are you in education? Are you in private business? And that is important because those stories, voices, and the impact that is affecting your constituency needs to be at the table when discussing what are the solutions. A lot of times we do say, okay, we have this big win, there's a government, there's a director, and then we sit back and then we wonder why the needs of our constituency are not being met. So a clear action is to identify what constituency you represent and join that initiative to make sure your constituency is well represented in the solution and delivery. Last thing I wanted to pick up on is, there's been a parallel to healthcare disparities. There's a lot of education around the social determinants of health. Well, digital equity and the digital divide is a social determinant. There is a future of healthcare where it exists that you're going to need access to internet, and not just for telehealth, because I think that's the misnomer people get, but to access your own data, to get health information, to collaborate with specialists and providers. And a lot of times providers are unaware of the barriers between the delivery of care and the endpoint, the user, individuals who are getting access to this. So that collaboration in the public-private partnership is very important. And that only exists when people who are on both sectors are on teams like this. So it's so critical that we have a more diverse and diverse from different constituencies in this team effort before we just go ahead and say, oh, okay, there's a committee, I'm good to go, and someone's going to figure this out for me, because otherwise your constituent will be left out. That's always the case.
And if I could just add, I think that, for those who are watching, who are part of the industry, we encourage you to join us in identifying solutions for the long term for universal access. My sense is that you want this more than anyone else, because it's part of your bread and butter. It's part of what your purpose is. And so I think there's an opportunity here to partner with government, to partner with the nonprofit sector, with advocates and leaders to ensure that we identify all solutions to this important issue.
Thank you for that, Dr. Fomenine, and from Miguel. This actually is a perfect segue to what I think is at the heart of this report, the idea of how do we build political will, how do we build coalitions in order to advance many of the recommendations. So I'm looking towards Dr. Fomanine here, as well as Jan. How can we organize around this issue? How can constituents organize around this issue? Are youth organizing around this issue? How do we do the coalition building work? And if anyone else on the committee would like to answer that question as well. But as we talk about political will, what are the ways we can organize, and what are the ways we can get active on the issue?
Thank you, Ryan. I think one of the things that's always compelling is storytelling and building coalitions around stories that are lived experiences. Speaking in my lane, Shared Harvest has been involved with surveying our communities that had resources from us. So it's very something, and then finding digital equity cohorts who are looking at that same data and comparing it nationally. So data is king, as we know, as we move in this era. So part of coalition building is understanding your interest group, being able to survey what's the real problems and the solutions, and then having representation to share those solutions and see if there is a synergy across other industries as well. The most common, I'm sure we'll probably list a couple of different organizations that if you want to be a part of to participate in coalition building, there are many. Coco, I know you guys are doing some incredible work. And again, in the health and digital health space, Shared Harvest is, so we can always connect you with opportunity to help in this space as well.
Thank you for that. Well,
hey, Ryan, I just want to add one thing.
Of course.
If folks are interested in learning more about ways and maybe organizations that you've worked with who are engaged on this space, you can go to the California Community Foundation websites where I work and look up the Digital Equity Initiative and sign up for those newsletters. There are about 50 organizations across LA County that are currently working on this. Some of them are youth serving organizations, some are health organizations, some are housing organizations, immigrant rights groups. But a lot of people across many sectors have really seen the importance of this. Even though their primary focus isn't broadband equity, they've come to see that their communities can't achieve the dreams they seek to achieve without broadband, and thus they've begun to get involved. And so if people want to, I think signing up there is also something folks can do. So I'll pop that into the chat if that's okay, the address for folks to go to.
Great. And once again, as Jared does that, nogoingback.la is where you can download the report. I want to continue to remind you of that. And then if you're on social media, our hashtags here are internet equity and broadband is a civil right, which I believe. We have time for maybe one more comment, and I usually like to do this during panel discussions. So for the members who've been speaking, what's one thing that you want to leave our audience with as we think about next steps? So what's one thing you'd like to leave our audience members with? And maybe I'll start with Danny.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Ryan, for putting me on the spot first. Happy to do so. I would say one thing is government needs to accept responsibility for closing the digital divide. Hopefully they can do so by organizing countywide to create an internet infrastructure agency to facilitate the deployment of these funds and additional public-private partnerships and partnerships with all the municipalities. But that's it. A sustainable way for government to accept responsibility for closing the digital divide.
All right. To our doctor, what's the one thing you'd leave our audience?
Healthcare is a human right, and anything that interferes with that is something that you need to galvanize to change. In this case, digital divide is impacting access to healthcare, and so we need to figure out a way to make it accessible, affordable, and fast and reliable to every community.
I love it. And you said data is king. I will say data is queen as well. And we need to continue to ensure that people have access to quality broadband. Jan, who I'm so honored could join us and take time from your studies, what would you leave our audience with?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Well, the internet is not going anywhere. So digital divide and digital inequity is something that needs to be addressed immediately. Education is revolving around the internet. So youth has very much noticed how much it's affected us throughout our high school years, and even now at my university right now, USC. It's something that's being addressed immediately since it is around the surrounding community. There's a huge difference when you're on campus to where you go anywhere else in the city, which says a lot about the infrastructure around Los Angeles. So it's definitely digital divide and digital inequity is definitely affecting youth in a heavy way.
Thank you, Jan. I'm a Bruin, but you're a Trojan after my own heart, so continue to do good work. And to our dynamic co-chair, Jared, what would you leave our audience with?
Don't settle for what we've currently got. It's not working for too many of us. And even if it is working, it's not working good enough. What we've got now is not going to be sufficient to the kind of service we're going to need in 5 years and in 10 years. Investing in a quality infrastructure benefits every Angeleno. Having every Angeleno online and able to access that benefits all of us in so many ways. Dr. Fomenine mentioned health, whether it's health or education, you name it. We get the Los Angeles we want if we're all online. And that means collective action, organizing to take advantage of the investments that have already been made. The money's there. Money's not the excuse at this point. It's working together to coordinate how those dollars get spent and how that infrastructure gets deployed. We can do this, Los Angeles. I'm excited about it. And that's all I had. Thanks, Ryan.
It's great. Unfortunately, Miguel Santana had to go to another meeting, but if he was here, he would say, please go to nogoingback.la in order to download the report to remind us the importance of having the information in order to move to power. You have the information here. Please follow us on social. Niles, who's done a fantastic job with this webinar, is someone, if you have more questions, just follow up. That's Niles at starinsights.com. And I will leave you with this. As I said, I'm in the heart of South Central Los Angeles, a community that has suffered from decades of disinvestment, so much so that getting quality access to broadband is still a challenge. And in the Los Angeles that Jared mentioned, whether you live in Watts or whether you live in Westchester, whether you live in Beverly Hills, or whether you live in Baldwin Hills, it should not matter where you live in order to get to access something that should be a civil right in 2022. So we do call you not only to download our report, but join us in actually investing in the infrastructure necessary so that amazing minds like Jan will be able to have access to quality broadband and not have to make a decision on whether to feed their family or whether to turn in their assignments, and so that our communities can actually change the equity gaps that we heard Dr. Fomenine speak to. This is a civil right. This is a human right. And as Los Angeles, we can do this together. Once again, my name is Ryan Smith. Chief Strategy Officer at Community Coalition, but a proud Internet Action Team member with the Committee for Greater Los Angeles. We're so excited that you joined us today, and we look forward to partnering you in the future. Thank you so much for your time, and have a really wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care. We'll see you soon.